Death is the one certainty in life, yet it remains one of humanity's greatest taboos. For centuries, we've whispered about it in the shadows, feared it, and fought against it. But what happens when the fight becomes unbearable? When does the pain outweigh the will to live? This is the story of terminal illness, the right to die, and the ethical dilemmas that surround it. Death comes to us all, but how we meet it, the when, where, and how, has become one of modern medicine's most profound ethical questions. I'm Dr. Moores, and this is Dr. Moore's Diaries, Whispers from the Morgue. Before we delve into the complex ethical debates surrounding the right to die, we must understand its historical context, how humanity first began addressing the suffering of the dying. Throughout history, physicians have sought ways to ease suffering. Ancient Egyptians used opium for pain, while Greek physicians like Hippocrates debated the ethics of providing remedies to hasten death versus the duty to prolong life. Until the 19th century, doctors had few effective treatments for pain. Opium was the primary tool, often used sparingly due to concerns about addiction and respiratory depression. The concept of physician-assisted death is not new. Ancient Greeks and Romans debated the ethics of euthanasia, with some philosophers like Seneca advocating for the right to end one's suffering. But it wasn't until the 20th century that the medical community began to document and formalize these discussions. The birth of modern palliative care is commonly attributed to Dame Cicely Saunders, a British nurse, social worker, and later physician who revolutionized end-of-life care in the mid-20th century. The early days, the birth of palliative care. In 1967, Saunders founded St. Christopher's Hospice in London, pioneering what she called total pain management, addressing not just physical suffering, but emotional, social, and spiritual distress at life's end. Saunders introduced the concept of regular giving for regular pain. Rather than waiting for pain to become unbearable, she advocated administering pain medication on a schedule to prevent suffering before it occurred. Saunders was among the first to use oral morphine solution regularly for cancer pain, carefully documenting its effects and appropriate dosing. Her groundbreaking approach included the radical notion that dying patients needed specialized care focused on comfort rather than cure. Before Saunders, dying patients were often seen as medical failures, pushed to the sidelines of healthcare. She insisted that care of the dying was as important as care of those who might recover. We're not helping them die, we're helping them live until they die. This distinction between easing suffering during natural death versus hastening death would become central to later debates about physician-assisted dying. The hospice movement spread from the UK to the United States and globally, with Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's groundbreaking 1969 book On Death and Dying helped to change attitudes toward caring for the terminally ill. In the US, Dr. Florence Wald, Dean of Yale School of Nursing, established the first American hospice in Connecticut in 1974. In Canada, Dr. Balfour Mount coined the term palliative care in 1975, helping to integrate end-of-life care into mainstream medicine. These early pioneers gave us the foundation of modern palliative care, focusing on symptom management, psychological support, and family involvement. But even with these advances, some patients continued to face suffering that couldn't be adequately relieved, leading to questions about when palliative care might not be enough. The right to die, a modern ethical frontier. Despite advancements in palliative care, a growing question emerged. What happens when even the best pain management and symptom control isn't enough? When suffering persists despite medical intervention? The paradox of modern medicine is that we've become so good at postponing death, but not always with quality of life intact. We can keep hearts beating and lungs breathing, but sometimes at tremendous cost to dignity and comfort. This creates the central question: is extending life always the right course? And who should decide? The right to die movement emerged from these questions. It advocates that terminally ill individuals should have the legal right to end their lives on their own terms, often with physician assistance. Daughter of ALS patient. My mother was a neurosurgeon. The irony wasn't lost on her when she was diagnosed with ALS. She knew exactly what was coming: the loss of movement, speech, eventually her ability to breathe. She told us, I've spent my life saving others. I should be able to decide how mine ends. Global perspectives, religion, culture, and legislation. Views on the right to die vary dramatically across religions, cultures, and nations. Currently, physician-assisted death is legal in several countries including Canada, Belgium, the Netherlands, and parts of Australia. In the United States, it's legal in Oregon, Washington, Vermont, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Maine, New Jersey, New Mexico, and Vermont, where it's known as death with dignity. Rabbi David Goldstein, in traditional Jewish thought, life is sacred, a gift from God that we are entrusted to protect. However, there's also recognition of suffering. The Talmud tells stories of prayers for the suffering to find peace. It's complicated. Imam Ahmad Farouk. Islamic jurisprudence generally prohibits suicide and euthanasia. Life is seen as Allah's to give and take, but there's a growing discussion about whether withholding extraordinary measures differs from active euthanasia. Sister Rosemary Catherine. Catholic teaching holds that life is sacred from conception to natural death, but there's nuance. We don't require extraordinary measures to prolong life. The focus should be on palliative care, addressing suffering without deliberately ending life. Father Nikolai, Orthodox Christian priest. In Orthodox Christianity, death is viewed as the separation of soul from body, not an end, but the beginning of a new life until resurrection. We believe death was not part of God's original plan for humanity, which is why our church firmly opposes euthanasia and the death penalty. Our funeral services reflect this understanding. They're filled with hope for the deceased's journey, not just grief at their departure. We pray for their soul's peaceful rest while awaiting reunion with their body at resurrection. Many traditions view death as transformation rather than ending. Consider this poem by the 13th century Persian poet Rumi. When I die, when my coffin is being taken out, you must never think I am missing this world. Don't shed any tears, don't lament or feel sorry. I'm not falling into a monster's abyss. When you see my corpse being carried, don't cry for my leaving. I'm not leaving, I'm arriving at eternal love. When you leave me in the grave, don't say goodbye. Remember, a grave is only a curtain for the paradise behind. You'll only see me descending into a grave. Now watch me rise. Hindu priest Sharma. Hinduism views death as transition, not ending. While suicide disrupts karma, some interpret ancient texts like allowing fasting until death for the elderly. Today's medical scenarios weren't contemplated in ancient texts. Mary Eaglefeather, Native American elder. Many indigenous traditions view death as part of the sacred circle of life, but our traditions often emphasize community decisions over individual ones. The person, family, and community might all have roles in these decisions. Dr. Kwame Nkosi, African bioethicist. In many African traditions, death is not an end, but a transition. There's a profound belief in life after death and the continuing presence of ancestors. Elder Wafula, Tiriki elder from Western Kenya. When someone dies in our Tiriki community, the entire village halts regular activities. No farming, no harvesting. This pause shows respect and is believed to help ancestors welcome the deceased without bringing hardship on those left behind. The Tiriki people of Western Kenya keep the deceased in their compound for 2 days before burial on the 3rd day. Then follow 7 days of night fire camps and celebrations. Elder Wafula. The dead are still with us in spirit. Our wailing, dancing, and traditional music celebrate their reunion with ancestors. When we slaughter chickens and cows for the funeral feast, it's not just to feed mourners, it's a celebration of the deceased's new spiritual journey. These traditions reflect a communal approach to death, where one's passing is processed collectively. Dr. Nkosi. If death is suspected to be caused by witchcraft, what's called dying by an evil soul command, additional rituals are performed to ensure the ancestors accept the deceased. The concept of hastening one's own death in these contexts would disrupt the spiritual transition process that's carefully maintained through community rituals. Dr. Miyazaki, Japanese bioethicist. Eastern philosophers often emphasize acceptance of natural processes. In Japan, there's traditionally been resistance to active euthanasia, but growing acceptance of letting nature take its course without intervention. Death as medical policy, the dark chapter of Nazi doctors. Before examining physician-assisted death as an individual choice, we must confront history's darkest chapter of medicalized killing, the Nazi doctors of death. Professor Rachel Cohen, Holocaust Studies. What happened under the Nazi regime wasn't about relieving suffering or respecting autonomy. It was the perversion of medicine into a tool of genocide, doctors becoming agents of state-mandated murder. Beginning in 1939, the T4 program authorized physicians to identify those deemed unworthy of life, primarily people with disabilities, mental illnesses, and incurable conditions. An estimated 300,000 were killed under this program. Dr. Michael Groden, Medical Ethics. These doctors abandoned their oath to first do no harm. They used medical language, mercy, release from suffering, to justify murder. Their actions represent the antithesis of true physician-assisted dying, which centers on patient choice and self-determination. After the war, the Nuremberg doctors' trial established the principle of informed consent as fundamental to ethical medicine, that no procedure should be performed without a patient's voluntary informed permission. The legacy of Nazi medicine is a warning. When physicians become arbiters of whose life has value, medical ethics collapses. This history compels us to place patient autonomy and stringent safeguards at the center of any right-to-die legislation. Dr. Daith, Jack Kevorkian's controversial legacy. No discussion of physician-assisted death would be complete without examining the controversial figure who brought it into American living rooms, Dr. Jack Kevorkian. Born in Pontiac, Michigan in 1928 to Armenian immigrant parents, Kevorkian graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School in 1952. He specialized in pathology, performing thousands of autopsies that gave him an intimate familiarity with how people die. After conventional medical practice, Kevorkian became increasingly focused on death and dying. In the 1980s, he began writing articles advocating for physician-assisted death and experimenting with devices to facilitate it. As pathologists, we witness the end results of disease, suffering, and medical intervention. Kevorkian often said it was this daily confrontation with death that shaped his views. Between 1990 and 1998, Kevorkian claimed to have assisted in the deaths of over 130 terminally ill patients. His homemade device, which he called the Thanatron, delivered fatal medications at the patient's control. Dr. Timothy Quill, palliative care specialist. Kevorkian was both a help and hindrance to the right to die movement. He brought attention to real suffering, but his methods, often performed in vans with minimal psychological evaluation, lacked the safeguards most advocates support. In 1999, Kevorkian was convicted of second-degree murder after the airing of a 60 Minutes segment showing him administering a lethal injection to Thomas Uke, who had ALS. This crossed the line from assisted suicide to active euthanasia. Kevorkian's methods were controversial, and he was eventually imprisoned for second-degree murder. Yet his legacy lives on, challenging us to ask, who owns the right to decide when life ends? Jeffrey Feger, Kevorkian's former attorney. Jack believed he was serving a higher ethical standard than the law recognized. He was willing to sacrifice his freedom for what he saw as a fundamental human right. Released in 2007 after serving 8 years of his sentence, Kevorkian died in 2011 at age 83 in a hospital in Royal Oak, Michigan. Ironically, not on his own terms. Dr. Monica Williams, Medical Ethics. There's a lingering question about Kevorkian's own death. Did the man who fought so hard for the right to choose one's death get to exercise that right himself? Did he have a living will? Would he have chosen a hospital death? These questions highlight the ongoing complexities of end-of-life choices, even for their most vocal advocates. The dark side, cults and coercion. The right to die takes a sinister turn when choice becomes coercion. History provides chilling examples of mass deaths under the guise of voluntary suicide. What we see in these cases isn't free choice, but the result of psychological manipulation, isolation, and fear. Leaders like Jim Jones create alternate realities where death seems preferable to living. In 1978, over 900 people died in Jonestown, Guyana, following Jim Jones' orders to drink cyanide-laced punch. In 1993, approximately 80 Branch Davidians died during a siege at their compound in Waco, Texas, under David Koresh's leadership. In 1997, 39 members of Heaven's Gate took their lives, believing they would board an alien spacecraft. More recently in Kenya, Pastor Paul Mackenzie allegedly led followers of the Good News International Church to fast to death, claiming they would meet Jesus. Beginning in 2021 and discovered in 2023, authorities found over 400 bodies in mass graves. Mackenzie exploited vulnerable people's faith. This wasn't right to die. It was manipulation leading to tragedy. The children found among the victims had no choice whatsoever. These tragedies highlight the critical distinction between autonomous choice by informed individuals and the exploitation of vulnerability by charismatic leaders. Modern practice, safeguards and procedures. Where legal, physician-assisted death involves extensive safeguards. Oregon Health Authority. Oregon's law requires multiple requests separated by waiting periods, confirmation of terminal illness with prognosis of less than 6 months, mental capacity evaluation, and the involvement of multiple physicians. Most jurisdictions require that patients be terminally ill with 6 months or less to live, mentally competent to make healthcare decisions, physically able to self-administer the medication, making voluntary informed requests, evaluated by multiple healthcare providers. AI and the future of end-of-life care. Artificial intelligence is transforming end-of-life care, offering both promise and new ethical questions. Predictive algorithms can now forecast with remarkable accuracy when a patient is entering their final months. This can allow more personalized palliative care, but also raises questions about when to share such predictions. These future AI systems can monitor vital signs, medication responses, and even subtle behavioral changes. They can alert caregivers to declining conditions or increasing pain before a patient might verbalize it. AI also offers possibilities for patients who've lost communicative abilities. Brain-computer interfaces may eventually allow patients with conditions like locked-in syndrome to express their wishes directly, bypassing physical limitations. We must ensure these technologies remain tools that empower patients and families, not systems that make decisions for them. The rise of personal AI assistants raises new questions about end-of-life planning. Imagine an AI that knows your medical history, understands your values, and can help draft living wills or medical powers of attorney. The potential benefits are enormous, more people completing these crucial documents with personalized guidance. But ethical concerns emerge. Who ensures the AI isn't subtly biased towards certain choices? Who's responsible if the AI misinterprets someone's wishes? And critically, should an AI be involved in such deeply personal decisions? AI could democratize access to end-of-life planning, but it can't replace human judgment entirely. The best approach may be collaborative. AI helping draft documents that are then reviewed by healthcare providers and legal professionals. Patients' rights and legal frameworks. Death is not the enemy. Suffering without choice is. As we continue to navigate the complex ethical, cultural, and technological landscapes of terminal illness, one thing remains clear. Every person deserves the right to die with dignity. Beyond the question of assisted death lies a broader landscape of end-of-life legal protections. Everyone, regardless of their views on assisted dying, should have advanced directives in place, documents that specify your wishes when you cannot speak for yourself. These typically include living wills specifying medical interventions you would or wouldn't want, medical power of attorney designating who makes decisions if you cannot, POLST forms, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment that become medical orders. These documents aren't just for the elderly, young people with terminal diagnoses, or even healthy individuals who want their wishes known in case of an accident should complete them. Dr. Sarah Jones, Hospital Ethics Committee. When patients haven't documented their wishes, families face agonizing decisions without guidance. I've seen families torn apart trying to determine what their loved one would have wanted. Forensic medicine and post-mortem ethics. When death occurs, whether naturally or through physician assistance, questions of investigation and tissue custody often arise. After death, the human body can still contribute to science. Post-mortem tissues are invaluable for medical research, helping us understand diseases and develop new treatments. But this raises questions about consent and privacy. Who has the right to decide how a person's body is used after death? A lingering question in physician-assisted death is whether post-mortem examinations should be performed. These examinations could provide valuable data on disease progression and medication efficacy, potentially improving future care. But this raises profound ethical questions. Did the person consent to having their body examined after death? Who owns tissue samples taken during an autopsy? How long can they be stored, and for what purposes? In conventional deaths, medical examiners have jurisdiction based on public interest. But in physician-assisted deaths, where the cause is known and documented, should the same rules apply, or should additional consent be required? The question of tissue custody extends beyond immediate examination. Biological samples might be valuable for research decades later as new technologies emerge. But consent obtained today may not anticipate future uses. This creates a tension between scientific advancement and respecting the deceased's wishes. Sarah Wilson. When my mother died through Oregon's Death with Dignity Act, we were surprised to be asked about autopsy and tissue donation. She had consented to organ donation but hadn't considered research samples. We were making decisions in a moment of grief that had long-term implications. These questions highlight the need for comprehensive advanced planning. In today's rapidly changing world, with emerging diseases, research on cloning, studies on prolonging life, and advances in artificial intelligence, the questions of when, where, and how to die with dignity become increasingly complex. As medicine advances, the line between prolonging life and prolonging dying blurs. Our ethical frameworks must evolve alongside our technical capabilities. Who ultimately decides? Is it the individual whose life is ending? Their family? Medical professionals? Religious leaders? Cultural traditions? Or some carefully balanced combination? Beyond the philosophical debates and legal battles are real people facing mortality. Whatever one's personal views, the conversations these questions provoke are themselves valuable, encouraging us to consider how we wish to live, how we hope to die, and what legacy we want to leave behind. Perhaps what matters most is not just how we die, but that we live fully until we do, that suffering is addressed compassionately, and that no one faces their final moments alone and unheard. In navigating these profound questions, we ultimately define not just our dying, but our living. Next episode, Who Owns Your Cells After Death?